Well, the world of medical science advances rapidly in some areas, but much slower in others. Years ago, government decisions to give free mammograms to women aged over 40 every 2 years changed the detection and the outcomes for victims of this cancer. Yet the scanning is problematic. Not only can it be uncomfortable for some women, but it also detects cancers that can only be seen. So early detection would lead to better outcomes still. Around the world, scientists have sought simpler solutions. The obvious one is a blood test. Well, this week, an Australian company took another step towards this solution. The co-founder and executive chairman of BCAL Diagnostics is Jayne, who joins me now. Jayne, many thanks for your time.
Thank you.
You've been after this, what is almost a holy grail for breast cancer detection for 14 years now. I mean, that's a long journey, isn't it?
It's a very long journey, but it's one that we need. There's been a blood test for prostate cancer since 1989, 1990, and today we still don't have a screening tool, blood test for breast cancer.
OK, so you are also the co-owner of the Sydney Breast Clinic, so you've really been at the front line of the scanning and the screening of women over a very long period of time.
Yeah.
So at what point did you realise that blood tests would have been a better solution if they could be obtained?
So a mammogram is the gold standard for breast screening today, and that's been around for 30 years. So if you think about the cars we drove, the telephones we used 30 years ago, the technology hasn't really evolved, and everything was going to move to a molecular basis. So a blood test, and as I said, there was a prostate cancer test available in 1989, and we need a screening tool. And at the moment, only 50% of women eligible for a mammogram actually have a mammogram. So there's many women that don't have any screening.
So why is that? What's the barrier to people having those mammograms?
Well, I'm not sure if you've seen one. However,
yeah, I have, and I understand what the issue might be.
Okay, women elect not to. Pain, religious, cultural reasons, also accessibility. Norfolk Island only got a mammogram machine probably about 5-6 years ago, so they didn't have a screening tool unless they left the island. So remote areas of Australia, it's very hard to access a mammogram.
And that leaves people highly vulnerable if they're not getting those tests. But even your blood test, as this is being now developed, that is working in conjunction with a mammogram. Explain why that's the case right now.
Yeah, so we're launching the blood test with the mammogram. We've got good results, 90% sensitivity, 85% specificity. And the reason we're launching that is in terms of the clinical utility of that test. What that means is if we went to the market and said there'll be no more mammograms, many of the clinical groups would not like it. And basically, a blood test gives a more accurate test. If I give an example, a few years ago, if you went for cervical screening, you'd go to your GP and they'd say, do you want to have a more accurate test, a combination test? And we're launching that way to softly launch into the market, and that will evolve over time.
So the work you've done is with Precion, and we should explain this to people, that the work that you're seeking to identify is lipids or fats that are present in breast cancer. And that's, if you think, is the key marker as to whether a person may need further screening.
So we've identified a signature. There's a number of lipids. We have an algorithm. When we started this 14 years ago, we used a medical device called mass spec, which was very large, very expensive. It created data, significant amounts of data. Now, mass spec is standard in most laboratories, and the actual data is used by an AI algorithm, so we can accelerate the interpretation of that data. What does that mean? It means that we can detect whether women have breast cancer, whether they have the disease or they don't.
And tell me about medical authorities here and overseas accepting these blood tests, accepting the breakthroughs that you're claiming.
OK, so any data is only as meaningful as the samples that you use. So we've collected samples in Australia under a very defined protocol and governance. Our ethics is through Royal Prince Alfred Hospital. We collect at Lifehouse, Westmead, Sydney Breast Clinic, and we've got a centre in Melbourne. We've published our data at ASCO, which is an American cancer conference, the last 2 years. And we work with the leading key opinion leaders in Australia to develop the test, breast surgeons and breast oncologists. I don't believe you can develop a diagnostic tool without the leading key opinion leaders. It's taken us a lot longer than we would have anticipated, but we're working very closely with the doctors. They have to have the confidence in the test when we take it to market.
Okay, so that's one test, if you like, or screening to try and get the product to market. The second one is your investors. For 14 years, you've gone to investors saying one day this might actually produce some money. That's the other big test of patience in a business such as this.
It is. Well, in the very early days, Ron Phillips and I, the co-founder, basically funded this. And I approached a number of people around Sydney that I knew had been successful and made money out of health care, and approached them in terms of it was a high-risk investment at that time, and they really held the faith, and I'm very grateful and thankful for them for that.
Okay, so you're a listed company now. You've got about $3 million in the bank. You know, this is always the thing about trying to sit there and presume in the future that there are cash flows, significant cash flows that can come if this is accepted.
Exactly. So I believe as soon as we have the product, the funding and valuation of the company will follow. I've never asked an investor to do anything I haven't done myself. So I'm the major shareholder. I've funded it for 14 years. And, you know, we need faith, hope and patience.
It's a cracking story, there's no doubt. And Jayne Shaw, I appreciate you telling it to me today.
Thank you.